Today I've got for you one of the very best nuclear revenge stories that I've come across. This one takes place back in World War II, and it's one of the most original stories that I've read. Imagine being in a position where everyone thinks you've passed away during the war, and therefore they build new homes on your land, and then from out of nowhere, you just rock up and say, "What's going on here?" Well, that is exactly what happens in this story of revenge. Town forced to bulldoze new development after building on land they don't own. Hi Reddit, I've got one gem of a story that my grandfather told me about his hometown after he came home from World War II. It has to do with a tree farmer, a corrupt mayor, and over 20 homes getting bulldozed. Enjoy. At the end of World War II, thousands of troops were heading home, starting new families, and wanted to move out of the city. There was a major housing boom all around the country. People couldn't move out of the cities fast enough, and developers could not build homes fast enough. There was a ton of money to be made in the construction business, which led to some underhand building practices. One such practice was starting construction before the land acquisition was finalized. Enter my grandfather. After serving as a pilot during the war, he came home to a very different town. When my grandfather went off to fight in 1942, the town that he described leaving was tired and worn down. But, to his amazement, the town he saw stepping off the train in 1948 was anything but. Newly paved roads, a traffic light, and new homes. New homes that just went on and on. He actually got lost on his way back to the family farm due to the new main town road being rerouted while he was away. But what took him by surprise the most was the new development being built on his childhood friend John's tree farm. This was surprising to him, mainly because he knew how much the farm meant to John and his family. The farm went back at least 2 generations, but my granddad just guessed that the developer made John's family an offer too good to refuse. However, that thought was shot down later that evening during his welcome home dinner back home. It was my great-grandmother that tipped him off that something was off. He couldn't recall exactly what she said, but it was something along the lines of, "Oh, I just wish John was still alive to be here." My granddad nearly choked. Not because of the news, but because John was not dead. He was still in Hawaii. My granddad had gotten a postcard from him not but 4 days before. It turns out that while John was off in the Navy fighting in the Pacific Theatre, John's dad had suffered a stroke and passed away, and his mother passed away less than a week later from a broken heart. More than likely, John was never informed of their passing. And now, 20 plus homes were being built on their land. My granddad about ran out of the house, jumped in his father's Model T, and raced down into town to send one bombshell of a telegraph to John in Hawaii. "John, your folks passed. Farm now being built on their land. Come quick, Granddad." My granddad never got a response back. He figures that John must have fainted from shock, then jumped up and ran to the Navy base to get on the first boat home. Because he was back home in less than 4 days, and he was mad. According to my grandpa, when he burst through the doors of the mayor's office, everyone in the room looked like they were about to drop dead. The poor desk clerk was fumbling over his words, trying to talk to John. Then the mayor came out of his office to see what all the commotion was about. As soon as he saw John, he went white as a sheet, then ran back into his office and locked the door. Getting nowhere at the mayor's office, John went to the next town over and hired a lawyer. What followed was a 7-year court case that ended in the mayor being sentenced to 8 years in jail and the developer going bankrupt. It turns out that after John's parents passed away, John wasn't able to be contacted for some reason and was just assumed dead. So, when an out-of-state developer wanted to build homes in the area, the mayor just permitted them to start building on John's farm. For a hefty kickback, of course. Also, because of John's lawsuit, the developer couldn't finish the pre-sold homes, which ended up in more lawsuits. In the end, the mayor and the developer and the town ended up having to pay John close to $45,000 in total. That's over $752,000 today. And then the farm had to be returned to its prior condition. To say John was happy would be a vast understatement. Today, John's tree farm is a nature reserve, and the story of the corrupted mayor is all but forgotten, except for by a few locals. John passed away in 1999, and my granddad has been back to his hometown a few times to visit his grave and to check on the old tree farm. And there we go. How about that for a story to kick off today's episode? That was nothing short of sensational. I absolutely love that one. Of course, it completely serves this corrupt mayor right. I do feel like it's a little bit harsh on the property development company. The mayor of the town has literally told them they can do this, and now they're the ones that are having to pay the price for it as well as the mayor himself. It's a little bit tough on them. However, For John and his family, this is just quite cool, isn't it? Like, you get your farm restored. Obviously, it's lost some of that originality, of course, but then you also get, in today's money, $750,000. I mean, I know which one I'd rather. Can you imagine being John in this situation, by the way? You know, just chilling in Hawaii, cocktail in hand, and he gets this note through. Yeah, by the way, everyone thinks you're dead. And also, your parents are dead. It's a pretty crazy message to receive. You also have no home anymore. Yeah, I'd probably get back as quickly as I could as well. Now for our next story of nuclear revenge. Fire me for speaking up, enjoy going out of business. Many years ago, I worked at an automotive repair shop that was owned by a very nasty person. This person actually had 2 shops that he ran, and the best way I can describe him was as a tyrant. Both shops had cameras, and he would watch us work from the comfort of his home. If he saw something he didn't like, such as taking a 5-minute smoke break, or not sweeping for half a minute during downtime, or if he just wanted to bust balls, he would call the shop and harass us. Or, better yet, at times, show up and harass us in person. In addition, he would regularly berate us for no reason, threaten to not pay us because the shops weren't busy, and would have an absolute meltdown if you dared question his authority. It was spectacular in the worst of ways. After working for him for a few months and dealing with his shenanigans, and getting sick of pointless arguments with him, I started reconsidering my employment there. Around the same time, the owner decided to move me from one shop to the other, really for no reason other than to likely try and push me out, as that was what he did with the few people that I'd already worked with. Odd coincidence, being that I hadn't discussed my thoughts of leaving with anyone, but I digress. I genuinely disliked the idea of working at this other shop. It was older and a bit run down, plus it was in a pretty terrible area with high crime. But I wanted to line something up elsewhere before I jumped ship. So I made the move. This is where the beginning of the end started for old Mr. Owner. Once I got settled into the new shop, I got to talking with my fellow technicians. As it turns out, the owner was unsurprisingly a racist scumbag, and every single one of the employees at this location, aside from me, was African American. I'll spare the details, but let's just say it's a miracle that the owner came into the shop, said what he said, and walked out breathing. In addition, he would regularly send people home with no pay for the day, just to be a jerk. Wow. This went on for weeks. Him coming by, being nasty to all of us, and I was just over it, and was just about to leave as I'd lined up other employments. The other techs were also over it. I went to give the owner my 2-week notice via phone, discreetly, which I should have known wasn't a great idea, and instead of discussing it like a human, he decided to come down and talk face to face. Well, our friend was so incensed that I put my notice in that he forced me to clock out and go home, and also forced 2 other techs who decided to stand up for me to do the same. I decided that I'd had enough of this guy's trash, and that not only did he deserve to have some kind of reciprocation against him, but the other techs deserve better than to continually be walked on. So, I filed a complaint with the Department of Labor and outlined everything. Within a few days, they'd launched an investigation, and of course, the owner found out who filed the complaint and called the shop and gave me heck about it. Stupidly though, because the phones he had were on recorded lines. Guess who I had request to listen to that conversation? In the end, I was terminated by him prior to my 2 weeks being up, as were the 2 techs who stood behind me. I filed for unemployment, which he fought me on by filing appeals with a judge, then not showing up 3 times in a row. This prompted the judge to bar him from requesting appeals against me and granting me full unemployment pay. Months later, I got a written letter from him extending an apology and an offer to work for him again. 2 months later, I got a letter from the DOL saying that the investigation was closed and that he'd been found guilty of multiple charges and was barred from operating a shop or any other business in the state for several years. Wow, I must say, I did not see that curveball coming at the end. Just when he knew he was about to be in massive legal trouble, he was like, you know what? I'm going to try one more time. Actually, do you want to come back and work for me? We had a great employee-employer relationship. I think we could amend this and get back to what we once were. Yeah, fair play for trying, mate. Fair play for trying, but see you in the cells. And now for our final revenge story of this episode. Girl who played me ends up getting played by the dude she cheated on me with. I am a 26-year-old man, and my ex, a 24-year-old female, let's call her Maggie, had been dating for about 6 months. The first 5 months were great. We started off slow, seeing each other once or twice a week for the first month. I realized I really liked this girl after our 4th date. She came back to my place that night and magic happened. After that, we started talking every day, and I basically had zero desire to talk to any other woman. I deleted my dating apps, I cut contact with this other girl that I'd seen a couple of times right before I met Maggie, and I felt good that me and Maggie had a good thing going. Now, I include these details as it's important to an incident that happens down the road. For the next 5 months, we went out every weekend, spending almost every entire weekend together. So, one night, after a night out having food and seeing a comedy show, she's just in an awful mood. There were about 6 comedians performing one after the other. The first dude came up and had that whole female dogs ain't trash, blah blah blah, don't ever settle act. It got laughs, but not from me. After his set, immediately, my girlfriend leaned over and asked what that was all about. I just shrugged and said, he thinks negatively of women. It's a comedy show, so take it with a grain of salt. She just said, I know. But then the whole of the rest of the show, she couldn't find anything funny. Fast forward to the second to last guy, who had a funny story about his cheating ex, but no hatred in his voice. He seemed over it and did not badmouth her at all, especially compared to the first guy. Maggie wanted to leave after this, and I didn't object because I could tell she was not enjoying herself. The car ride home was absolute projecting at its finest. For 15 minutes, I was hit with accusations of finding misogyny to be okay, and that I'm probably cheating on her because all men do it. While I was driving, I literally unlocked my phone and told her to look through my texts, but that wasn't enough. I dropped her off and she said we're finished and that she'd never seen this side of me before. I sat there shocked and at a loss for words. She got out and didn't turn back, just walked into her house. I'm not gonna lie, I cried on the drive home once I was out of her presence. It was that helpless feeling of thinking you did everything right, but realizing it's not gonna work. A month passes by and I sort of am over it. I'd reached out once, being ignored, and then the feelings dissipated gradually with no contact between us. Hindsight really is a female dog. Why didn't I see through the BS sooner? Fast forward to a Friday night where I'm just hanging with a couple of buddies. I get a call from an unknown number. I ignore it. 5 minutes later, a text. Hey man, I think you and I should talk. You know Maggie? Well, I saw her text between you two, and I think you're going to enjoy this. I could feel this grin coming across my face as I realized what was happening. I knew before he told me. I called him and he basically told me that she was playing both of us. Except this dude had a far worse end of the stick. I come to find out they've been married for 2 years and he was home in Brazil taking care of his dying mother for the last 6 months. Oh my God. Wow. I didn't expect that. He reassured me he was not mad at me and that he knew I was a good guy. I just felt bad for the guy at this point. Honestly, however bad OP must have been feeling at that stage, think about this other bloke caring for his dying mother in Brazil and then hear about this? Oh my word, your wife of all people. Goodness me. Here's the best part. He then explains to me that this past weekend they drove in his registered car about 6 hours out of town for a concert and weekend getaway. At the concert, her phone died and he went to use the bathroom in inverted commas. But actually, he slipped away, drove back home in his car, and packed all her trash up out of their house. He then drove another 90 minutes to her parents' house, explaining the whole situation, and dropped all her stuff there. He blocked her number after she demanded he pay for her flight home. Let's just say her parents aren't too proud of their daughter's decisions, and have reached out to her husband numerous times, begging for his forgiveness. What a guy to reach out to me and share his delicious shenanigans. We're still friends. Wow. And there we go. What a way to end today's episode. That was a truly sensational story. That line about her being married for 2 years and her husband caring for his dying mother in Brazil for 6 months may just be one of the most shocking twists of a story I've ever heard. I just did not expect that. I thought the guy was going to call him and say, just so you know, you're being cheated on, like with me. Just to let you know. Not, oh, I'm actually her husband and I know what she's doing. There you go. And that is the beauty of life, I guess, depending on which way you look at it. Guys, I'll tell you what else is beautiful. Subscribing to the channel. If you haven't done so already, hit this button down here. Also, as you can see, I post these episodes on every single podcast platform in the world. So if you prefer not to watch me, which I would take personally, I really would, then yeah, check them out on Apple, on Spotify. If you're new to the channel, hit the button, like, follow, watch some more right here or down in the description below. And I'll see you all tomorrow with a brand new Reddit story.